Imagine waking up without an alarm, no phone buzzing on the nightstand, no traffic sounds filtering through the window, no schedule to check, no emails waiting, no meetings to prepare for. Instead, you open your eyes to the soft gray light of dawn easing into a rock shelter. The air is cool and crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Somewhere nearby, you can hear the low murmur of voices as others in your group begin to stir. A baby cries briefly, then settles. Someone laughs. Outside, birds are calling to each other in the growing light. This is how human beings woke up for hundreds of thousands of years. This was morning. It is 40,000 years ago. Give or take a few millennia, you are a Homo sapiens living somewhere in what we would now call Europe, Africa, or Asia. Anatomically, you are identical to modern humans. Same brain size, same body structure, same capacity for language and thought and emotion. But your world, your daily reality, is so different from ours that it is almost impossible to imagine. So, here is the question that keeps archaeologists and anthropologists endlessly fascinated. What did you actually do all day? We have this image burned into our minds from countless movies and documentaries. Cavemen, brutish and hairy, constantly fleeing saber-toothed tigers, spending every waking moment desperately searching for food, always on the edge of starvation, living nasty, brutish, and short lives of pure survival. That is the picture. Prehistoric life as one long nightmare of hardship and terror. Except it is almost completely wrong. The archaeological evidence tells a radically different story. Early humans were not just surviving, they were living. They had rich social lives, leisure time, art, music, spirituality, and humor. They told stories around fires, they decorated their bodies, they carved intricate figurines, and painted breathtaking images on cave walls. They cared for their elderly and their disabled. They buried their dead with ceremony and grave goods. They had culture, complex and sophisticated culture, that we are only beginning to understand. But before we can talk about cave paintings and ritual burials, we need to understand the basics. What did a typical day actually look like? How did our ancestors spend their time when there were no jobs to commute to, no bills to pay, no grocery stores to visit? The truth is going to surprise you. Early humans probably worked less than you do. Studies of modern hunter-gatherer societies, which offer our best window into prehistoric lifestyles, show that people typically spend only 4 to 6 hours a day on what we would call subsistence activities: gathering food, hunting, preparing meals, maintaining tools and shelters. That is it. The rest of the time was leisure, socializing, playing, creating art, telling stories, simply hanging out. This flies in the face of everything we have been told about progress. We imagine our ancestors as desperately poor in time and resources, while we are rich and comfortable. But in terms of free time, the opposite might be true. A prehistoric human probably had more leisure hours in a week than most modern people get in a month. If you are watching this to fall asleep, that is exactly why these videos exist. Drop a comment letting me know where you are right now and what time it is. Someone is always in Tokyo at sunrise, someone in London at midday, someone in California at midnight, all drifting off to the same stories about our shared human past. The more we study prehistoric life, the more complex and nuanced the picture becomes. Yes, there were dangers. Injuries were common and often serious. Infant mortality was high. Infections that we would treat with antibiotics could be deadly. Life expectancy was lower than today, though not as low as you might think. If you survived childhood, you had a decent chance of living into your 50s or 60s. Some individuals made it considerably longer, but within those years, people lived full lives. They laughed, loved, mourned, created, struggled, and celebrated. They were not biological machines optimized purely for survival. They were human in every sense we understand that word. They had the same fundamental needs we do. Food and shelter, yes, but also connection, meaning, beauty, and play. So let us walk through a day together, not a dramatic day involving a mammoth hunt or a confrontation with a rival group, though those happened too. Just a regular day, an ordinary day, 40,000 years ago, when an early human woke to the dawn and lived their life in ways that were both utterly foreign and strangely familiar to how we live ours. Because understanding how our ancestors actually spent their time does not just teach us about the past, it raises uncomfortable questions about the present, about how we live now, about what we have gained with civilization and what we might have lost, about whether progress always means what we think it means. Let us start at the beginning, with that moment when gray light filters into the rock shelter and another prehistoric day begins. You are not waking to an alarm. There are no alarms. There is no concept of being late, no schedule to keep, no boss waiting. Instead, consciousness returns slowly, naturally, pulled back by the gradual brightening of the sky and the stirring of bodies around you. The first thing you notice is the cold, not the bone-threatening cold of deep winter, but that crisp morning chill that makes you reluctant to leave the warmth of your sleeping spot. You are lying on a bed of dried grasses and animal skins pressed close to other members of your band. Not for intimacy necessarily, just for survival. Body heat is a resource too valuable to waste. The second thing you notice is the smell. Wood smoke, always wood smoke, but faint now. The fire that burned bright last night has died down to embers. Mixed with that is the scent of unwashed bodies. Not unpleasant exactly, just human. The smell of rendered animal fat from yesterday's meal. The earthy, mineral scent of the rock shelter itself. If you are near the coast, maybe salt air. If you are inland during spring, the green smell of new growth. Someone is already awake. There is always someone awake. Sleep in the Paleolithic was not like modern sleep. We have evidence, both from studying modern hunter-gatherers and from sleep research, that humans probably practiced what scientists call biphasic or polyphasic sleep. You would sleep for a few hours after dark, then wake for a period in the middle of the night. This was not insomnia. This was normal. During that wakeful period, people would talk quietly, tend the fire, check on children, perhaps make love, perhaps simply lie there thinking whatever thoughts people think when the world is silent and dark. At any given moment during the night, someone was usually awake. Someone was listening for the sounds that did not belong. The footfall of a predator, the crack of a branch, the distant howl that meant danger was moving through the territory. Safety was not something you could take for granted. It was something you maintained hour by hour through vigilance and cooperation. The person who is awake now is feeding the fire. You can hear the soft sounds of movement, see the sudden brightening as flames catch on new fuel. Fire management was perhaps the most important skill your people possessed. Let it die completely, and you would have to restart it, either by carrying embers from another group's fire, possibly miles away, or by using friction methods that were exhausting and time-consuming. Better to keep it going. Better to make sure someone always took responsibility for feeding it through the night. Who held that job varied. Sometimes the elderly, who slept lighter anyway and had already proven their worth to the group in 1,000 other ways. Sometimes young adults, particularly those without small children, who needed their parents' full attention. Sometimes it rotated an informal understanding that everyone contributed to the survival of the whole. As the fire builds, more people begin to stir. Children first, almost always. Kids wake up ready to move, ready to play, just as they do now. You hear a small voice, the rustling of bodies, a mother's soft murmur, telling a child to stay close, stay warm, wait for the sun. But children are terrible at waiting. Within minutes, a few of the older ones are up, stretching, moving toward the fire, their breath visible in the cold morning air. The adults wake more slowly. There is no rush. This is important to understand. The entire concept of hurrying, of being pressed for time, these are modern inventions. Your day is governed by light, by hunger, by the weather, by the seasons. The sun is just beginning to paint the eastern sky in shades of gray and pink. There are hours before you need to be doing anything in particular. Right now, the most important thing is transitioning from sleep to wakefulness in a way that does not waste the precious calories you will need for whatever the day brings. So people stretch slowly, methodically, working out the stiffness that comes from sleeping on the ground. They yawn, scratch, attend to basic bodily functions. If you are in a rock shelter or cave, there is probably a designated area for waste, far enough away to avoid contamination, but close enough to be safe. Someone, probably one of the more experienced members of the group, steps outside the immediate sleeping area to check the surroundings. Not paranoid exactly, but careful. What changed during the night? Are there tracks near the camp that were not there yesterday? What is the weather doing? Is that cloud formation in the west promising rain or just passing through? Is the wind shifting, bringing different scents, different information about what is happening in the wider world? This morning assessment is crucial. Paleolithic humans were readers of signs in ways we can barely imagine. They could tell from the behavior of birds whether a predator was nearby. They could read weather patterns days in advance by watching clouds, feeling humidity, noticing how different plants responded to atmospheric changes. They could identify individual animals by their tracks and tell you how long ago they passed, whether they were healthy or injured, alone or part of a herd. All this information gets processed and, importantly, shared. As more people wake and gather around the growing fire, there is conversation. Quiet at first, then building as the group consciousness comes online. Dreams might be discussed. The Paleolithic mind probably did not draw hard boundaries between dreaming and waking reality. A vivid dream might be interpreted as a message, a warning, a visit from ancestors, worth talking about, worth considering. Plans begin to form, but loosely. The group needs food, but that is always true. The question is what kind and where to find it. Someone might have noticed yesterday that certain berry bushes were nearly ripe. Someone else might have seen signs of a large animal moving through a particular valley. A third person might suggest checking fishing spots if you are near water. None of these are orders. Nobody is in command in the way we think of leadership. Instead, decisions emerge from discussion, from consensus, from individuals choosing to follow those with the most relevant expertise. But that is still ahead. For now, in these early morning moments, the main activity is simply being together. The band, your extended family, your survival unit, is reassembling after the night's dissolution. Everyone made it through another period of vulnerability. Everyone is here, accounted for, ready for another day. There is comfort in that. There is safety in numbers, yes, but also something deeper, something that explains why humans are so fundamentally social. We literally evolved to need each other. Those who felt content in groups, who drew comfort from proximity to kin, who enjoyed cooperation. Those were the ones who survived. Their descendants carry genes that make isolation feel wrong and community feel necessary. Children are playing now. Their energy infectious. They are not playing anything structured, nothing with rules. Just running, chasing, wrestling, the kind of physical play that builds strength and coordination. The adults watch with half their attention, letting the kids be kids, but ready to intervene if play gets too rough or someone wanders too far. Meanwhile, practical concerns are being addressed. Someone is checking tools from yesterday. Is that spear point still secure in its shaft? Did that carrying basket develop any weak spots? Is there enough cordage? Or does someone need to spend time making more? These are not chores in the modern sense. They are not unpleasant tasks you do before getting to what you actually want to do. They are simply part of life, as natural as breathing. And all of this is happening without any sense of time pressure. The sun is higher now, the morning chill beginning to fade. Your stomach is starting to remind you it is empty. Other people are probably feeling the same. Soon, attention will turn to food, but not yet. For now, you are warm, you are safe, you are surrounded by people who know you and care about your survival, because your survival increases their own chances. This is waking up in the Paleolithic. No sudden jarring into consciousness, no racing to get ready, just the slow communal transition from sleep to activity, guided by light and bodies and the ancient rhythms that governed human life for hundreds of thousands of years. That desire to hit snooze, to wake up slowly, to ease into the day rather than attacking it, that is not laziness. That is your Paleolithic brain remembering how mornings used to work, back when we had all the time in the world, and the only schedule that mattered was the movement of the sun across the sky. Let us talk about breakfast. Except your ancestors 40,000 years ago did not have breakfast. Not in the way you think about it. They did not wake up at 7 in the morning, stumble to the kitchen, and pour themselves a bowl of cereal. They did not have fixed meal times at all. Not really. They ate when food was available, when hunger demanded it, when the opportunity presented itself. This might sound chaotic, but it was perfectly adapted to their reality. Picture yourself waking in that rock shelter as the first light filters through the entrance. Your stomach growls. You are hungry, so you eat. It is as simple as that. What you are eating depends entirely on what is available. Maybe there is leftover meat from 2 days ago when the hunters brought down a red deer. It has been hanging in the cool back of the shelter, away from direct sunlight, wrapped in the deer's own hide. The cold autumn air has kept it from spoiling, though it is starting to develop that slightly gamey smell. That means you should probably finish it today. You pull off a strip and chew it slowly. It is tough, requiring real jaw work, but it is protein and fat and exactly what your body needs after a night of sleep. Your teeth are strong, your jaw muscles powerful. Dental analysis of Paleolithic skulls shows remarkable wear patterns, evidence of a lifetime spent processing tough foods. But here is what is fascinating. Those same teeth show something else entirely. Microscopic plant residues, starch grains from roots and tubers, phytoliths from seeds and nuts. Your ancestors were not just eating meat, they were eating everything. Beside the meat, there is a wooden bowl, really just a section of bark, folded and sealed with pine resin, filled with hazelnuts gathered 3 days ago. You crack a few between your back molars, a technique passed down through generations. Children watch adults do this from infancy, learning the exact angle and pressure needed to crack the shell without crushing the meat inside. Next to the nuts, there is a leather pouch containing dried berries, blackberries, gathered during the late summer abundance and dried in the sun. They are wrinkled now, concentrated sweetness, and you eat a handful. The sugar hits your system immediately, providing quick energy. But the real treasure is the basket of roots near the fire. Someone, probably one of the older women with decades of plant knowledge, dug these up yesterday from the riverbank. They are cattail roots, starchy and nutritious, but essentially inedible raw. So they have been placed near the fire, not in it, just close enough that the heat is slowly breaking down the tough fibers and converting complex starches into digestible sugars. This is cooking, but not like you know it. No recipes, no precise temperatures, no timers, just knowledge accumulated over thousands of generations about what heat does to different foods. The roots have been sitting there all night, slowly roasting in the residual warmth from a fire that never quite goes out. By morning, they are soft enough to eat, sweet enough to enjoy. You pull one out, careful not to burn your fingers. You peel away the outer layer and bite into the flesh. It is not delicious by modern standards, but it is filling, and more importantly, it is safe. Raw, these roots contain compounds that would give you a nasty stomachache. Cooked, they are perfectly edible. This transformation, turning raw plants into food through fire, might be one of the most important technological breakthroughs in human history. It effectively doubled or tripled the number of plant species your ancestors could eat. The evidence for this incredible dietary diversity comes from multiple sources. Coprolites, fossilized feces found at archaeological sites across Europe and Africa, when analyzed under microscopes, reveal an astonishing variety of plant remains. Seeds from dozens of different species, pollen from flowers, microscopic fragments of leaves, roots, and bark. Some coprolites show evidence of insects as well. Grasshoppers, beetle larvae, termites. These might seem unappetizing to modern Western palates, but they are excellent sources of protein and fat, and many contemporary hunter-gatherer societies consider insects delicacies. Dental calculus, the hardened plaque that builds up on teeth, tells a similar story. When archaeologists scrape it from Paleolithic skulls and examine it under high-powered microscopes, they find plant starches from across the spectrum: wild grains, root vegetables, nuts, berries, even plant fibers that were probably chewed to extract moisture or to soften them for other uses. What emerges from all this evidence is a picture of incredible dietary flexibility. Your ancestors were not specialized. They were opportunists capable of exploiting virtually any food source in their environment. Coastal groups ate fish, shellfish, seaweed, seabirds, and sea mammals, supplemented with whatever plants grew near the shore. Inland forest dwellers ate deer, wild boar, nuts, berries, roots, and mushrooms. Groups living near rivers ate fish, waterfowl, aquatic plants, and the land animals that came to drink. This flexibility was crucial for survival. Environments change, seasons shift, animal migrations follow unpredictable patterns. A group that could only eat one or two types of food would starve when those resources became scarce, but a group that could eat 50 different things would always find something. As you eat your morning meal, others are doing the same. The young mother is sharing nuts with her toddler, showing him how to crack them, how to pick out the meat without getting shell fragments. He is not very good at it yet, his small hands lacking the strength and coordination, but he is learning. The old woman is preparing something more complex. She has taken some of the leftover meat and is pounding it between two stones, mixing it with rendered fat and dried berries. She is making pemmican, though she does not call it that. It is just food that lasts, concentrated nutrition that can be carried on long journeys or stored for lean times. This is knowledge, technical and precise. The ratio of meat to fat to berries has to be right or it spoils. She learned this from her mother, who learned it from hers, a chain of knowledge stretching back thousands of generations. Nobody is eating alone. That almost never happens. Food is social, shared, distributed, according to complex rules that everyone understands implicitly. The hunter who made the kill yesterday is not eating any more than anyone else. In fact, he might be eating less, because that is how the system works. Kill an animal, share it with the group, and when someone else makes a kill, they will share with you. This is insurance, risk pooling, the social glue that holds the group together. Children run back and forth, stealing bites from different adults, getting swatted away playfully, or having food pressed into their hands. Nobody is stingy with children, and if there is not quite enough, the adults eat less to make sure the young ones get fed. The meal is not formal or ceremonial. People eat standing up, sitting down, walking around, checking tools, talking, laughing, but it serves crucial social functions. Everyone is together, reinforcing bonds, sharing information, making loosely formed plans for the day. Who is going to gather plants today? Who is going hunting? Who is staying back to work on that deer hide? These decisions happen organically, emerging from conversation rather than command. Food preparation continues throughout this conversation. Hands are always busy. Someone is grinding seeds between stones. Someone else is sorting through dried herbs, discarding any that show signs of mold. A teenager is learning to use a sharp flint flake to slice thin strips of meat for drying. These skills are entirely learned through observation and practice. No written recipes, no formal instruction. Children watch adults, try to imitate, get corrected, and try again. By the time they are adults themselves, they possess encyclopedic knowledge about food. Which plants are edible and when, how to identify them across different seasons, where to find them, how to process them, how to store them. This knowledge base is staggering. Ethnographic studies of modern hunter-gatherers show that they typically know detailed information about 200 to 300 plant species. They know which parts are edible, which require processing, which are medicinal, which are toxic, which are useful for other purposes like cordage or poison. For arrow tips, your ancestors almost certainly possessed similar knowledge. They had to. Eat the wrong mushroom and you are dead. Fail to properly prepare certain roots, and you are spending the next 3 days with debilitating cramps. This is not casual knowledge. This is life and death information, carefully preserved and transmitted across generations. As the morning meal winds down, the fire is fed a few more sticks. Someone is always responsible for fire tending, usually rotating through different individuals. The meal was not elaborate, but it was adequate. Everyone has eaten something. Bellies are reasonably full. Energy levels are sufficient for whatever the day will bring. And that is really all that matters. Your ancestors were not gourmets, but they understood nutrition in a deep, intuitive way. They knew that variety mattered, that different foods provided different benefits, that balance across days and weeks was more important than perfection at every meal. They were eating to live, but they were also living to eat. Food was pleasure, even when it was simple. The satisfaction of cracking a nut perfectly, the sweetness of ripe berries, the rich fattiness of bone marrow roasted over fire. These were not just calories. They were experiences, shared moments, connections to the landscape and to each other. And now, with morning fully arrived and stomachs filled, it is time to get to work. Here is what nobody tells you about prehistoric life. The hunt gets all the glory. The dramatic confrontations with mammoths, the coordinated takedowns of deer, the dangerous face-offs with predators. That is what captures our imagination. But here is the truth that would have been obvious to anyone actually living 40,000 years ago. Hunting was the exception, gathering was the rule. On any given day, somewhere between 60 and 80% of your calories came from plants, roots, tubers, nuts, seeds, berries, leaves, flowers. The percentage varied by season and location. Groups living near coastlines might have gotten more protein from shellfish. Communities in northern regions might have relied more heavily on meat during long winters. But for most human populations, most of the time, plants were what kept you alive. This was not because our ancestors were particularly fond of vegetables. It was simple evolutionary mathematics. A successful hunt might provide enough meat to feed your band for several days. But hunts failed more often than they succeeded. Animals are fast, unpredictable, and dangerous. They require hours of tracking, careful coordination, and considerable luck. Plants, meanwhile, stay put. They grow in predictable patterns that anyone with enough knowledge could learn to read. So while the hunters were out there hoping for glory, the majority of your band was engaged in the real work of survival, walking the landscape with practiced eyes, reading signs invisible to outsiders, collecting the foods that would actually end up in tonight's meal. Now here is where we need to be careful about assumptions. For decades, anthropologists told a neat story about prehistoric gender roles. Men hunted, women gathered. It was presented as natural, inevitable, perhaps even biologically determined. But the evidence tells a more complicated story. Yes, in many prehistoric societies, women and older children did most of the gathering, while men specialized in hunting. But not all societies, and not even most necessarily. Archaeological evidence from various sites shows women buried with hunting weapons. Isotope analysis of ancient bones reveals some women ate diets as meat-heavy as any male hunter. Some groups practiced communal hunting, where everyone participated. Others had specialized gatherers of both sexes who spent their entire lives perfecting knowledge of plants. The truth is probably this: prehistoric societies were pragmatic. They organized labor in ways that made sense for their specific circumstances. So picture yourself on that gathering expedition. It is mid-morning now. The sun has been up for a few hours, burning off the morning mist. You are heading out with 3 other people. Your mother's sister, who knows the plant locations better than anyone in your band. A younger cousin, maybe 11 years old, who is learning the roots and the knowledge. And your own child, 3 years old, strapped to your back in a sling made from carefully softened deer hide. You are not just wandering randomly. You are following a mental map built up over years of observation. The oak grove 3 miles north should have acorns ready for collection right now. The patch of wild onions near the creek will be past its prime, but there is a stand of cattails just beyond it where you can dig up starchy roots. If you are lucky, you might find a beehive with honey. If you are very lucky, birds' eggs. The walk itself is no casual stroll. You are covering somewhere between 5 and 10 miles today, most of it over terrain that would challenge modern hikers. Rocky hillsides, thick underbrush, streams to ford, slopes to climb. You are doing all of this while carrying a child, plus the tools of your trade: a digging stick, fire-hardened and worn smooth from use, several baskets woven from plant fibers nested inside each other, a leather bag for small finds, and maybe a stone knife tucked into a belt made from twisted plant fibers. Here is what makes gathering so different from hunting. It is not about adrenaline or drama. It is about attention. You are reading the landscape like a book, noticing details that would be completely invisible to an outsider. The slight discoloration of soil that indicates wild tubers growing below. The pattern of animal tracks that suggest a fruit tree nearby. The specific angle of sunlight that tells you which side of the hill will have ripe berries. Your aunt stops at what looks like an unremarkable patch of ground, but she sees something you are still learning to recognize, a particular type of grass that always grows near edible roots. She drives her digging stick into the earth, probing carefully. 3 inches down, she strikes something solid. She works the stick around it, loosening the soil, then reaches in with her hands and pulls up a tuber the size of your fist. Pale, knobby, completely unappetizing to look at, but you know from experience that when it is roasted in the coals of tonight's fire, it will be sweet and filling. She hands it to you. You place it carefully in your basket. She digs again. Another tuber and another. This spot is rich. In 10 minutes, you have collected enough tubers to feed everyone tonight. But you are not done. Your aunt knows these plants by heart. More importantly, she knows their stories. The stories are how you remember the knowledge. She tells your young cousin about the time her grandmother got terribly sick from eating a root that looked almost exactly like this one, but had slightly different leaves. She points out the distinction. 3 veins in the leaf instead of 5. That tiny difference means the other plant would kill you, shutting down your breathing within hours. This is education, but nothing like sitting in a classroom. It is survival knowledge passed down through stories, demonstrated with actual plants, reinforced through years of observation. Your cousin will learn hundreds of these lessons. By the time she is your age, she will know perhaps 300 different plant species, by sight, by season, by location. Modern botanists spend years in university learning to identify plants. Your ancestors learned it by necessity, starting in early childhood, because getting it wrong could mean death. The group moves on. You wade through a shallow stream, cold water shocking against your legs. On the far bank, your aunt spots something that makes her smile. Mushrooms growing from a fallen log. She approaches carefully, examines them from multiple angles, even smells them. Mushrooms are tricky. Some are nutritious and delicious. Others cause violent illness. A few will kill you. She picks 3 and leaves the rest. She is certain about these ones. But caution is always wise. Hours pass in this rhythm, walking, observing, collecting. The baby on your back has fallen asleep, lulled by the gentle motion. Your baskets are getting heavier. Wild grapes, still slightly tart but edible. Seeds from a grass that you will grind into flour back at camp. Bark from a specific tree that, when boiled, makes a tea that reduces fever. Your aunt collects this last one carefully, never taking so much that she damages the tree. She learned long ago that you have to think about next season, next year, the generations coming after you. This is sustainable harvesting. Though your ancestors did not have a word for it, they just knew that if you stripped a plant bare, it would not be there next time you needed it. The groups that learned this lesson survived, the ones that did not face starvation when resources ran out. By early afternoon, you are miles from camp. Your legs are tired. Your shoulders ache from the weight of the baskets. But there is something almost meditative about this work. No rush, no pressure, just the steady rhythm of walking and gathering, the warmth of the sun on your back, the sound of birds calling to each other in the canopy above. You are completely present in a way that modern humans rarely experience. Every sense is engaged. You are listening for the rustle of animals, watching for the shimmer of water that indicates a stream ahead, smelling the air for smoke that might mean another band is camping nearby. Your younger cousin asks a question. She has spotted a plant with bright red berries and wants to know if they are safe to eat. Your aunt does not just answer. She walks over, examines the plant, and launches into another story, how her mother once found these berries during a harsh winter when other food was scarce, how they sustained the band through 3 days of blizzard, how you have to be careful because birds can eat them safely, but humans need to cook them first. Otherwise, they cause stomach cramps. The knowledge transfer continues. Every plant is a lesson. Every location is a memory. This landscape is not just territory to your people. It is a library. Every tree, every stone, every stream carries information accumulated over generations. Finally, late in the afternoon, the group turns back toward camp. Your baskets are full now, heavy with food that will feed your entire band tonight. You have walked maybe 8 miles total. Your feet hurt, your back aches. The baby has woken up and is fussing, wanting to be fed. But you are satisfied. This is good work, important work, the kind of work that keeps everyone alive. When you get back to camp, there will be no fanfare. Nobody is going to celebrate your return the way they celebrate a successful hunt. But everyone knows the reality. The hunters might come back empty-handed tonight. They often do. But you brought food, reliable, nutritious, life-sustaining food, and tomorrow you will go out and do it again. This is the rhythm that sustained humanity for hundreds of thousands of years. Not the dramatic moments, but the steady, patient, knowledgeable work of gathering. Your ancestors were reading the landscape in ways we have almost completely forgotten, paying attention to nature with an intensity that most modern humans never experience, and doing it not as a hobby or a spiritual practice, but as the fundamental work of survival. Here is something that might genuinely surprise you. Your ancestor probably was not hunting today, or yesterday, maybe not even this week. We have this image of prehistoric life as a constant struggle, early humans waking up each morning and immediately heading out to chase down mammoths or wrestle with saber-toothed cats. Hollywood loves this narrative, but the reality was far more interesting and far more strategic. Hunting for early humans was not a daily grind. It was an occasional, high-stakes event that required immense planning, patience, and more often than not, ended in failure. A successful hunt might happen every few days if you were lucky, every few weeks if you were not. The rest of the time, you were preparing, planning, tracking, and most importantly, relying on gathering to fill your stomach. But when the hunt did happen, it was extraordinary. Let us say today is one of those days. The signs have been building for a while. Yesterday, scouts spotted fresh tracks from a small herd of antelope moving through a valley about 5 miles from camp. The animals are heading toward a seasonal water source, following patterns your people have observed for generations. The timing is right. The weather is clear. Several experienced hunters are available and healthy enough to make the attempt. This is how it begins. Not with sudden impulse, but with careful deliberation. The group gathers in the early morning. 6 men and 2 women, all proven trackers and hunters. They discuss the plan using a combination of spoken language and hand signals that have been refined over thousands of years. Who will take which position? Where are the animals likely to go? What are the fallback options if things do not work out? They carry spears, each one a masterpiece of prehistoric engineering that took days to create. The wooden shaft carefully straightened over fire and seasoned for months to prevent warping. The stone point napped from high-quality flint, traded from a quarry 200 miles away, hafted with plant resin and sinew that has been processed and dried to create a bond stronger than most modern adhesives. Some of the hunters also carry atlatls, spear throwers, that use leverage to triple the velocity and distance of a thrown spear. This technology is relatively new in your region, maybe only a few thousand years old, but it is already revolutionizing hunting in the same way the bow will revolutionize it thousands of years from now. The group moves out, and immediately you notice something. They are not rushing. There is no frantic chase, no dramatic sprint across the savannah. Instead, they are walking at a steady, sustainable pace, reading the landscape as they go. This is where hunting becomes a science. One of the trackers kneels beside a depression in the sandy soil. He studies it for several long moments, then signals to the others. The track is fresh, probably from this morning. The depth and clarity tell him the animal was moving at a walk, not alarmed. The spacing between tracks indicates it is a young adult, healthy, good size, but not too large to bring down. He can tell all this from a single hoof print. This is not magic. It is pattern recognition honed over a lifetime of observation. Your people have been tracking animals since childhood, learning to read the landscape the way you might read a book. Every broken twig, every disturbed pebble, every scratch on a rock face tells part of the story. Where the animals went, how fast they were moving, how long ago they passed, whether they were calm or alarmed. The group follows the trail for hours, no rushing, just steady walking, periodically stopping to check signs and adjust their strategy. This is the part of hunting that never makes it into the dramatic retellings, the long, patient stalking that requires more mental endurance than physical strength. Around midday, they spot the herd, 8 antelope grazing in a shallow valley near a waterhole. Now comes the critical decision point. Do they attempt an ambush, trying to get close enough for spear range, or do they use the technique that humans, uniquely among all predators, have perfected? They choose persistence hunting. Here is what makes humans terrifying predators. We cannot outrun almost any animal in a sprint. A healthy antelope can hit 50 miles per hour. A human tops out around 15. But we have something no other animal has. We can run for hours in the heat of the day without overheating. Thanks to our nearly hairless bodies and incredible capacity for sweating, most animals covered in fur and lacking efficient cooling systems have to stop and rest after intense exertion, or they will literally overheat from the inside. The hunters spread out and begin to jog toward the herd. Not a sprint, just a steady, sustainable trot. The antelope spot them immediately and bolt, gone in seconds, disappearing over a ridge. But the humans do not stop. They follow the tracks at that same steady pace, reading the signs, keeping up the pressure. An hour passes, then 2. The sun is brutal now, but the humans keep moving. Their bodies designed for exactly this kind of endurance. They are sweating profusely, yes, but that is the point. Each drop of moisture evaporating from their skin is carrying away heat that would otherwise build up and shut down their muscles. They find the herd again. The antelope run, but they are showing signs of stress now. Tongues hanging out, panting heavily. They cannot cool down fast enough. The chase continues. 3 hours. 4. The trackers are rotating the lead position, allowing individuals to drop back and recover slightly, while others maintain the pressure. This is cooperative hunting at its finest. No single human could do this alone, but a coordinated group, communicating constantly, sharing the effort, can accomplish what seems impossible. Finally, after nearly 5 hours, they close in on a single antelope that has separated from the herd. The animal is stumbling now, its cooling system overwhelmed, its muscles beginning to fail from the combination of heat and exhaustion. One hunter moves in close enough for a spear throw. The weapon flies true, striking behind the shoulder, and moments later, it is over. The hunters stand around the fallen animal, not cheering or celebrating yet. First comes a quick, precise cut, and an acknowledgement. We cannot know the exact words or gestures, but evidence from multiple prehistoric sites suggests early humans performed some kind of ritual around successful kills, respect for the animal that gave its life, gratitude to whatever spirits or forces they believed governed the hunt. Then comes the butchering, which is itself a sophisticated technical operation. These hunters know animal anatomy better than most modern surgeons know human anatomy. Every muscle group, every organ, every useful piece. They work quickly and efficiently. The hide comes off in one piece, valuable for clothing and shelter. The choicest cuts of meat are separated for immediate consumption and for carrying back to camp. Organs that spoil quickly are prepared for eating on site. Nothing is wasted. Even the bones will eventually be cracked open for their marrow, one of the most nutrient-dense foods available. But here is the problem. They are 5 miles from camp, and they have just produced several hundred pounds of meat and materials. They cannot carry it all in one trip, and leaving meat unattended means lions, hyenas, and vultures will claim it within hours. This is where the social dimension of hunting becomes crucial. 2 runners head back to camp at speed to bring reinforcements. The rest stay with the kill, building a fire to keep scavengers at bay, and beginning the process of smoking some of the meat for preservation. Within a few hours, more people arrive from camp. Elders, children old enough to help carry, nursing mothers who left their infants with relatives. Everyone participates in the harvest. The trip back to camp is a celebration. Successful hunts are rare enough that they are social events. There will be feasting tonight, stories told around the fire, probably dancing and music. The hunters will recount the chase in detail, and in the telling it will become part of the community's collective memory. Another story to teach young people about strategy, persistence, and cooperation. But let us be clear about something. This does not happen every day or even every week. Between successful hunts, there are dozens of failed attempts, tracks that lead nowhere, animals that prove too fast or too alert, injuries that force the hunters to turn back, hunts that simply do not work out despite everyone doing everything right. Hunting was important, absolutely. It provided concentrated protein and fat that gathering alone could not match. The social bonds formed during cooperative hunts helped cement group cohesion. The skills required, tracking, weapon crafting, strategic planning, pushed the development of human intelligence and communication. But hunting was never the main source of calories for most prehistoric groups. That honor went to gathering, which happened every day, provided the majority of nutrition, and did not require risking life and limb. Hunting was the occasional glory, the high-stakes gamble that sometimes paid off spectacularly. What made early humans successful was not that they were the best hunters. It is that they were good enough at hunting while also being excellent at everything else. By midday, the camp was alive with a sound that would have been instantly recognizable to any craftsperson throughout history. The rhythmic tap, tap, tap of stone on stone. Not loud, not violent, just persistent and purposeful. The sound of someone making something that did not exist before. Your aunt was sitting on a flat rock near the central fire, a hammerstone in one hand and a piece of flint in the other. Every few seconds, she would strike the flint at precisely the right angle, sending a small flake spinning off into the dust. Around her, a scatter of rejected pieces and failed attempts, the archaeological debris that would still be visible 40,000 years later, telling stories to people who had learned to read stone. This was not occasional work. This was daily maintenance, as essential as eating or sleeping, because tools did not last forever. That spear point used yesterday might have chipped when it hit bone. The scraper used to process a hide last week had a dull edge now, nearly useless. In a world without metal, without mass production, without the ability to simply buy replacements, you made your tools or you did not survive. Stone tool making, what archaeologists call knapping, was not something you just figured out one afternoon. It was a skill that took years to master, requiring an understanding of stone properties that bordered on intimate knowledge. Different rocks fractured in different ways. Flint was predictable. Obsidian was sharp but fragile. Chert was reliable but harder to work. You had to know where to find good stone, how to test it, how to recognize quality before you invested hours of work. Watch your aunt working, and you would see expertise that took a lifetime to acquire. She was not just hitting rocks together randomly. She was reading the stone, seeing lines of potential fracture, invisible to untrained eyes. Each strike was calculated. Too hard and the piece would shatter. Too soft and nothing would happen. The angle had to be exact. The point of impact precisely chosen. It was geometry and physics, executed entirely through intuition and muscle memory. The process was called the prepared core technique, and it represented centuries of accumulated knowledge. Your aunt had shaped this piece of flint over the past hour, carefully removing flakes to create a core with just the right shape and angle. Now she was ready for the payoff. One perfect strike, and a long, thin blade detached from the core, sharp enough to slice through hide or meat with minimal pressure. She examined it critically, running her thumb along the edge, then nodded. Good enough. But she was not done. The blade needed hafting, attachment to a handle that would make it actually useful. This was where craft became art. She had prepared a wooden handle earlier, a piece of hardwood with a slot carved into one end. Now she pulled out a small leather pouch containing pine resin she had collected and heated until it became sticky, mixed with a bit of charcoal and crushed bone for strength. This would become the prehistoric equivalent of superglue. Her hands moved automatically through processes she had performed thousands of times. Heat the resin over the fire, apply it to the handle slot, position the blade precisely, wrap the joint with thin strips of sinew that would shrink and tighten as they dried. The entire process took maybe 10 minutes, but it drew on decades of experience and generations of accumulated knowledge. Near her, your brother was working on a different problem entirely. He had a piece of antler from the deer killed 3 days ago and was slowly carving it into a spear point. This was different from stonework. Antler was organic, flexible, capable of taking impacts that would shatter stone, but it was also harder to shape, requiring different tools and different techniques. He was using a stone baron, a chisel-like tool to scrape and carve the antler. The work was tedious, producing a constant, soft scraping sound that formed a counterpoint to your aunt's rhythmic napping. This point would be different from the stone-tipped spears most hunters used. Lighter, more flexible. It could be thrown farther and was less likely to break on impact, but it took hours to make. An antler was only available when someone successfully hunted deer or similar animals. Stone was everywhere. Antler was precious, so you used it carefully for special purposes, and you made sure everyone in the group knew who had made what. Because here is something the archaeological record has only recently begun to reveal. Prehistoric craftspeople took pride in their work. We know this because we find tools that are more beautiful than they needed to be. Stone points shaped with perfect symmetry, even though asymmetrical points would work just as well. Bone needles decorated with tiny carved patterns. antler spear throwers carved into the shapes of animals. Nobody decorates something purely functional unless they care about aesthetics, unless they want their work to be recognizable, admired. Your brother's spear point would be efficient, yes, but it would also be beautiful, because when you carried it, when you used it to feed your family, you wanted everyone to know who had made it. Status, reputation, identity, all conveyed through craftsmanship. Across the camp, 3 women were working on an equally essential task: clothing production. One was scraping a deer hide stretched across a wooden frame, using a stone scraper to remove every trace of fat and membrane from the inner surface. Her hands moved in steady strokes, overlapping each path slightly to ensure complete coverage. This was not quick work. A single hide might require hours of scraping, and even then, you were not done. The hide had to be treated either by smoking it over a fire or by rubbing it with a mixture of brain tissue and fat that prevented it from becoming stiff when it dried. The brain tanning process was chemistry without laboratories, developed through centuries of trial and error. Someone, somehow, had figured out that brains contained exactly the right compounds to preserve leather. Maybe they discovered it by accident, maybe through systematic experimentation. Either way, the knowledge had been passed down parent to child for generations. Nearby, her sister was working on a hide that had already been tanned. She had a bone awl, a pointed tool for punching holes, and was slowly, methodically creating a garment. Punch a hole, thread sinew through it, punch another hole. The stitching was crude by modern standards, but remarkably effective. These clothes would be warm, durable, and flexible, lasting for seasons, maybe years, protecting their wearers from cold that could kill in hours. The third woman was doing something that would have seemed impossible to earlier humans. She was sewing with an actual needle, a tiny piece of bone drilled with a hole at one end, threaded with sinew. This technology was less than 20,000 years old in your time, a recent innovation that had revolutionized clothing production. With needles, you could make clothes that actually fit, tailored to individual bodies, decorated with sewn-on beads or dyed leather strips. She was making winter clothing for her daughter, fur-lined and layered, warm enough for the brutal cold that would come in a few months. The little girl sat nearby, watching intently, occasionally trying to help. This was how knowledge transferred, not through formal instruction, but through constant observation and imitation. But clothing and tools were not the only things being made. An older man sat by himself, working on something smaller, more delicate. He had a collection of shells he had traded for last summer when a neighboring group had visited from the coast, 3 weeks' walk away. Now he was drilling tiny holes in them with a stone drill, a painstaking process requiring steady hands and infinite patience. These would become beads strung on plant fiber cord to make necklaces or bracelets, decorative, purely social. Nobody needed jewelry to survive, but humans had been making it for at least 100,000 years, probably longer, because survival was not enough. We needed beauty, status markers, ways to express identity and affiliation. Those beads said, "I have connections to the coast, and I have time to make beautiful things, and I value aesthetics." All of that conveyed through pierced shells on a string. What is striking about all this activity is the specialization. Not everyone was good at everything. Your aunt had spent decades mastering stonework and was genuinely expert. Your brother excelled at antler and bone carving, but was merely adequate at napping. The woman making winter clothing was the best leather worker in the group. And when her skills were needed, others contributed food or help with other tasks in exchange. This was not quite a market economy, but it was close. A recognition that different people had different talents, and that the group benefited when people specialized. It was also the foundation for something increasingly important: social complexity. In groups where everyone could do everything equally well, There was not much basis for hierarchy or status differentiation, but when individuals developed specialized skills that others needed, power dynamics shifted, and everywhere, children watched. A boy of maybe 8 sat near your aunt, trying to replicate her movements with his own small stones. Most of his attempts failed, producing nothing useful, but she encouraged him anyway. Occasionally, she would take his hand, guide his strikes, show him the right angle. This was education, prehistoric style. No schools, no formal curriculum, just constant observation and practice under the guidance of experts. By the time the boy was 15, he might be competent at basic toolmaking. By 25, if he had talent and dedication, he might be expert enough to teach others, and the knowledge would flow forward another generation, each one adding small refinements, tiny improvements that would accumulate over centuries into technological revolutions. The afternoon sun moved across the sky, and the sounds of craft continued. Tapping, scraping, the crackle of fire, occasional conversation, creating the material culture that made human life possible, building one patient stroke at a time, the foundation for everything that would come after. If you imagine early humans as exhausted, half-starved figures trudging endlessly across the landscape, constantly hunting, constantly gathering, constantly on the brink of collapse, you are not alone. That image has been repeated for decades. Life before civilization, we are told, was nasty, brutish, and short. A constant struggle for survival. No time for anything except work. But when anthropologists started living with modern hunter-gatherer societies and actually counting how people spent their time, a very different picture emerged. On average, adults in many foraging societies only spend about 4 to 6 hours a day on what we would call work. Finding food, preparing it, maintaining tools, basic camp upkeep. The rest of the day is not filled with frantic scrambling. It is filled with nothing in particular. Resting, talking, playing, making music, grooming, staring into the distance, simply existing. If your day 40,000 years ago were plotted on a modern timesheet, it would confuse most corporate managers. Yes, there are bursts of intense effort, tracking animals for hours, carrying heavy loads of gathered food back to camp, shaping stone tools with careful precision. But these bursts are surrounded by long stretches of low-intensity, flexible time. Time you can bend around your body's energy, the weather, the mood of the group. So what did people actually do with all those hours? A lot of it would look surprisingly familiar and strangely slow. You rest. That might mean lying on your side under a patch of shade, half listening to the chatter of your relatives. It might mean sitting near the fire, absently turning a smooth pebble in your fingers, watching the smoke drift upward in twisting ribbons. When the body is your only real tool, preserving it is part of survival. Resting is not laziness. It is maintenance. You socialize. Conversation in a small band of 20 or 30 people is not optional background noise. It is the web that holds the group together. Every talk about who saw which herd of animals, who found a new stand of tubers, who argued with whom last night. These are not just idle gossip. They are information-sharing systems, conflict management strategies, emotional first aid. You play with children. You let them climb over you like a living jungle gym. You show them how to throw little sticks at a target or how to gently handle a piece of stone without cutting themselves. Their games might look like chaos, but through them, they are rehearsing adulthood, practicing coordination, testing social boundaries, experimenting with risk and trust. For long stretches of the day, there is no urgent agenda, no tight schedule, no alarm clock dragging you from one task to the next. The pace of life is dictated by the slow cycles of the sun, the seasons, and the movements of animals, not by the minute hand on a dial. And then, somewhere in all that unscheduled time, something else begins to happen. Humans start to invent fun. Archaeologists have found small objects at prehistoric sites that do not fit neatly into any category of tool or weapon. tiny carved animals made of bone or antler, smooth-shaped pieces of stone drilled through the center like early spinning tops, little figurines of people, sometimes exaggerated in strange ways. To a hungry adult crouching over a fire, these might not do much, but to a child, they are toys. You can picture it, a small hand trying to spin a stone disc on the packed earth. Two kids pretending to hunt with miniature spears made from twigs. A parent, half amused, half attentive, letting them help with a task that does not really need helping. Play is not a distraction from real life. It is real life. Through play, children learn to aim, to negotiate, to share, to lead and follow. There are hints of games for adults too. Certain small stones and bones, found together in patterns that suggest dice or counters, etched lines on flat rock surfaces that might have been game boards, places where pieces were moved back and forth in quiet competitions that passed the time and strengthened social bonds. We do not know the rules they used or the stakes they played for, but the impulse is clear. When immediate needs are met, human minds look for patterns, challenges, little puzzles to solve. Games are structured daydreams, and early humans seem to have had time for plenty of them. And then there is music. In caves in Europe, archaeologists have discovered delicate flutes, carved from bird bones and mammoth ivory, some of them more than 40,000 years old. They are not crude noisemakers. Some have carefully spaced holes that produce recognizable musical scales. Someone sat down and experimented, adjusting each hole just a bit, learning by ear how to turn raw bone into a working instrument. Imagine the first time someone in your band brings one of those flutes out by the fire. The sky is dark. The stars are beginning to appear. Embers are glowing. They lift the flute to their lips, take a breath, and a clear sound rises above the crackle of the fire and the soft murmur of voices. For a moment, everyone freezes. Then the notes repeat, hesitant at first, then more confident. Someone starts to clap a rhythm. Another person taps a stick against a log. Feet begin to move. Bodies sway. The camp, which just a few minutes ago was quietly settling in for the night, is suddenly alive with dance. Music and dance are more than entertainment. They synchronize bodies and minds. When everyone moves together, breathes together, when voices rise and fall together, something powerful happens in the brain. Group identity strengthens, anxiety fades, the world feels for a moment coherent and safe. In small, vulnerable bands of early humans, those moments of shared rhythm may have been as important as any spear or shelter. After the dancing comes the other great technology of leisure, stories. You are back at the fire. The night is quiet now. A few last sparks drift upward like tiny glowing insects. The older members of the group edge closer to the flames. Children lean against their parents. Someone, maybe the best talker in the band, begins a story. It might be about the last great hunt, when the wind changed suddenly and nearly ruined everything. It might be about the time the river flooded and the group had to move camp in a hurry. It might be about a trickster animal who steals fire or a spirit who lives in the thunderclouds and punishes the greedy. Some of these stories are clearly about real events. Others reach into the world of myth and imagination, but all of them carry something. A warning, a clever strategy, a memory of who did what and why it mattered. Without writing, without records, stories are the memory of the group. They carry information across years and generations. Where the good water is in a dry season, which plants can cure a fever, and which can kill you. What happened the last time someone broke a particular social rule? Listening to these tales, by firelight, half awake, half drifting, you are not just being entertained, you are being trained quietly and gently for the rest of your life. But not all of this time is spent in conversation, music, or play. Some of it is devoted to the slow, meticulous work of grooming. Early humans did this much, as primates do today, carefully attending to one another's hair, picking out dirt and parasites, inspecting skin with absolute concentration. It is both practical and soothing. The kind of intimate contact that says, without words, "You matter, I am paying attention to you." Then comes decoration. Red ochre, a naturally occurring iron-rich pigment, shows up at human sites going back hundreds of thousands of years. It is often ground into powder, mixed with fat or water, and applied to skin or hair. Is it sunscreen? Insect repellent? Symbolic body paint? It might be all three at once. You sit while someone traces lines on your face, your chest, your arms. Maybe they mark you as a member of a particular band. Maybe they signal your role in a ritual, or your status as someone who has completed a dangerous hunt. Hair is braided. Simple jewelry made from shells, teeth, or carved bone is threaded through hair or hung from cords around wrists and necks. These acts take time. They are not required to eat, drink, or stay alive, but they are part of how early humans turned bare survival into a life with identity, beauty, and meaning. And in between all this talking and playing and decorating and music making, there are long stretches of something that modern life has almost taught us to forget. Just watching. You lie on your back and look at the clouds drifting across the sky. You sit quietly and follow the path of a line of ants carrying food back to their nest. You stand at the edge of camp and watch a herd of animals grazing in the distance. You trace the patterns of stars, noticing how some constellations rise at particular times of year, how the moon waxes and wanes. To a modern observer, this might look like boredom, but for early humans, this constant, gentle observing is part of how they build a mental map of the world. It trains attention, it sharpens intuition. The person who has spent hundreds of evenings quietly watching the sky might be the first to notice an unusual cloud pattern that hints at an approaching storm. The child who has spent endless hours following animal tracks just for fun might become the best tracker in the band without ever being formally taught. And there is something else here, something less practical and more mysterious. When you have no glowing screens, no written words, no background music piped in from distant speakers, silence and stillness do not feel empty. They feel full of insect hum and bird calls, the sigh of wind through grass, the distant rush of water, the soft breathing of people you love nearby. In that stillness, the boundary between you and the world can feel thinner. You are not a separate mind trapped in a frantic schedule, glancing at nature through a window on your day off. You are an animal in an environment, embedded in it, attentive to it, shaped by it. So the day of an early human 40,000 years ago is not a blur of endless toil. It is a pattern of effort and ease, of focused work and rambling leisure, hunting, gathering, crafting, yes, but also joking, singing, dancing, grooming, decorating, storytelling, cloud watching, stargazing. Their lives were dangerous in ways ours usually are not. Illness, injury, and hunger were always nearby, but they also had something that has become rare in many modern lives. Long, unbroken stretches of time in which nothing urgent had to be done. Time to let the mind wander. Time to be with others without an agenda. Time to simply be awake in a living world. So let us zoom back in on that ordinary day 40,000 years ago. You are not alone out there on the savannah, or in the forest, or along the icy riverbank. You live in a band, not a village, not a city, a tiny human world of maybe 20, 30, 40 people, rarely more than 50, small enough that you know every voice, every laugh, every step in the dark. You can tell who is walking behind you by the way their foot scrapes the ground. You recognize a cough in the middle of the night. This is not an accident. It is how your species works. Bands that are too small cannot defend themselves, cannot share enough skills, cannot find enough marriage partners. Bands that are too large become unstable. Too many conflicts, too many mouths to feed, too hard to move together when the herds leave or the seasons change. So, natural selection, culture, and sheer practicality have all pushed your ancestors into a kind of sweet spot, a living room-sized society, intimate, flexible, deeply personal. Everyone in that little group fits into a mental map in your head. Who is generous? Who is lazy? Who can be trusted to keep a secret? Who will share food when the hunt goes badly? These invisible maps of relationships are as important as stone tools or fire. They are how your people survive. And where there are relationships, there is conflict. Not courtroom drama, not kings and judges, but everyday friction. Someone took more meat than they earned. Someone flirted with someone else's partner. Someone skipped their turn watching the fire. In a band this small, you cannot just walk away and never see them again. You are going to be sleeping 10 feet from them tonight. So how do you keep the peace without police, laws, or prisons? You use the oldest tools human beings ever invented: gossip, mediation, reputation. Gossip in your world is not idle chatter. It is law enforcement, news, and social media rolled into one. When two hunters argue over who wounded the antelope first, people notice. The story gets repeated around the fire that night, retold and reshaped. By the time it has made the rounds, everyone knows who was selfish, who was generous, who apologized, and who held a grudge. No one writes anything down, but nothing is forgotten. If someone hoards food, that becomes a story. The next time there is a shortage, people may be slower to share with him. If someone is brave in a dangerous hunt or kind to a sick elder, that becomes a story too. These stories are your social credit score. They determine who gets help when they are in trouble. For bigger conflicts, you do not have a courthouse. You have elders. The older woman who has seen 100 arguments about meat and marriage. The man who remembers the last time two brothers almost came to blows and how that was settled. They are not judges in the modern sense, but people turn to them when tempers flare. They sit between the angry parties, speak slowly, bring up past events, add context, remind everyone of shared hardships and past kindnesses. Mediation is a survival strategy. A feud in a band of 30 can be a death sentence. Split the group in half, and suddenly each side is too small to defend itself, too vulnerable to the next bad winter. So the whole social system is quietly biased toward reconciliation. Underneath all of this is a simple truth. Your survival depends on other people. That starts early, from the moment you are born. In your band, children do not belong to just one nuclear family in the modern sense. They belong to the camp, to the group, to the network. Your mother matters, your father matters, but so do your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, your older siblings, and even unrelated adults who have basically been adopted into the family circle. In the language of modern anthropology, this is cooperative breeding. In the language of your ancestors, it is just life. If your mother dies or gets injured, or simply has to walk all day to track a migrating herd, you do not automatically die with her. There are other arms to carry you, other minds invested in your survival. That redundancy, multiple adults caring for the same children, is an invisible safety net woven through early human life. It also frees people to specialize. Some adults are better at patient teaching, some at rough play that builds balance and strength, some at comforting a child waking from a nightmare. The result is that by the time you are 10 or 12, you have learned from a whole village's worth of teachers, each passing on tiny fragments of knowledge inherited from their own parents and grandparents. Relationships and partnerships within this world are more varied than any simple model. Different environments, different cultures, and different times probably saw different patterns. In some groups, long-term pair bonds might have been the norm, partners raising children together for many seasons. In others, partnerships may have been more fluid. The key point is that there was no single natural prehistoric marriage model. What remained constant was the need to manage jealousy, share resources, and protect children. Formal taboos, joking relationships, and unspoken rules all evolved to make this possible. And a band of 30 is not the whole world. Beyond the circle of familiar faces around your fire, there are other bands, other groups speaking similar languages or dialects, tied to you by distant kinship, old alliances, or simple habit. You might only see them a few times a year, but those visits are some of the most important events in your life. Imagine late summer or the end of the dry season when resources are temporarily abundant in one particular valley. Word spreads, not with phones or maps, but through chains of meetings. A lone hunter passes another band and mentions where the game is thick. Slowly, bands converge. This is your version of a festival. At the seasonal gatherings, trade blossoms. A man from a coastal group brings shells and dried fish. Someone from the mountains brings obsidian for blades. Others have ochre for paint, fine skins, carved bone tools. Objects travel hundreds of miles in small jumps, changing hands again and again, each trade sealed with conversation, stories, maybe a shared meal. Mating happens here too. If your band only has 30 people, you do not want everyone pairing up exclusively inside that tiny circle for generation after generation. Inbreeding is a silent killer, so alliances with other bands matter. Young people meet potential partners from outside. Some return to your band with a new mate. Some leave, joining another group permanently. In modern terms, this is population genetics. For your ancestors, it is just life moving forward. These gatherings are also where information spreads. Someone has discovered a new way of attaching stone points more securely to a spear. Someone has found a valley where winter is a little less harsh. Someone has noticed a new predator in the area. Stories, warnings, and techniques ripple out through these networks, like signals traveling across the continent, carried in memories and words instead of wires. All of this depends on one extraordinary adaptation: language. Not just grunts and gestures, but layered, flexible, combinatorial speech. The ability to say not just lion and there, but 3 lions came from that ravine last dry season when the river was low, so do not camp there with small children. By 40,000 years ago, your ancestors almost certainly had languages as capable as any spoken today. Different vocabularies, different rhythms, but the same basic cognitive machinery: syntax, tense, metaphor, jokes, insults, love songs, lullabies. Language lets your band coordinate complex hunts. It lets elders tell children about dangers they have never personally seen. And at night, lying half asleep near the fire, language lets you drift on waves of quiet storytelling. Tales of heroic animals, clever ancestors, dangerous spirits, lost lovers. In this world, the elderly are not pushed aside. They are hard drives. An old body cannot do everything it once did. Knees ache, eyes blur, hands shake a little when napping stone. But the mind, honed by decades of experience, becomes more valuable with each passing year. The old man who cannot chase a deer can still remember which stars mark the change of season. The grandmother, who no longer gathers as far from camp, remembers which plants cure stomach pain and which ones are deadly. The elder who has lived through a brutal winter can advise when it is time to move, even if the sky looks deceptively calm. Their memories are walking libraries of famine and abundance, of floods and dry years, of conflicts and reconciliations. In a world without books, losing an elder suddenly is like a modern library catching fire overnight. Which brings us to death. People died young, often from infection, injury, childbirth, accidents while hunting, or simply falling from a tree. But what is striking in the archaeological record is not just the fact of death, it is how people responded to it. We find graves, not just bodies dropped in holes, but careful arrangements, skeletons curled in fetal positions, sometimes dusted with red ochre, as if painted for a final journey, individuals buried with tools, beads, pieces of meat, animal teeth, ornaments. In some Neanderthal sites, bodies appear to have been laid to rest in pits that were then filled deliberately, perhaps even with flowers. This suggests something more than disposal. It hints at ritual, at belief, at the idea that the dead mattered. When someone dies in your camp, the ordinary rhythm breaks. Gathering trips are postponed. Hunts are quieter. People sit closer together at night. Words are spoken more softly. Children ask questions. Adults tell stories about the dead person's bravery, generosity, or foolish mistakes. Death, too, becomes part of the ongoing conversation of the group, but in a different register, not about behavior to be judged, but about meaning to be found. The act of burying the dead, of returning them to the earth with care, does something to the living. It knits them together in shared grief, shared memory, shared fear, and shared hope. In that sense, social life and community are not just pleasant additions to early human existence. They are the core technology that made everything else possible. Your ancestors did not survive because they were the strongest individuals. They survived because they were embedded in networks of care, obligation, communication, and memory. Around that small circle of 20 to 50 faces, the entire human story is already unfolding. Cooperation and conflict, love and jealousy, wisdom and foolishness, birth and loss. A tiny moving tribe carrying fire, tools, stories, and genes across the landscape. By the time the hunting and gathering of the day were done, when bellies were mostly full and the fire had burned down to a steady orange glow, something else usually began. Something that did not fill the stomach or sharpen a spear, but still felt necessary. Your ancestors had another job besides staying alive. They had to make sense of being alive. Picture the entrance of a cave as night falls. The last light is fading outside. The air cools, and the sounds of insects and distant animal calls begin to rise. Inside, the fire paints the walls with moving shadows. Someone picks up a piece of red ochre. Someone else unrolls a length of sinew with shell beads threaded onto it. In the half-darkness, people start to transform themselves and the world around them. To us, it looks like art and religion. To them, it was probably just life. Let us start with the most famous evidence. Deep in the dark, far from the cave mouth, far beyond where anyone needed to go to sleep or store food, there are paintings. Not casual doodles near the entrance, not quick sketches made while waiting out the rain. Some of the most spectacular images in Ice Age Europe appear hundreds of meters underground in places you cannot even reach without crawling or climbing, places where no sunlight ever reaches. Horses, bison, lions, woolly rhinoceroses, mammoths, herds flowing across the stone as if the rock itself were alive. Carefully chosen curves in the cave wall become the bulging shoulder of a bison, the arch of an animal's ribs, the swell of a horse's chest. Some images are shaded and layered as if the artist wanted them to move in the flickering torchlight. This was not interior decoration. Nobody was living down there. To make these paintings, people had to gather torches, fuel, pigments, and tools. They had to organize expeditions into absolute darkness. They had to know the cave well enough not to get lost. They chose these places deliberately, then filled them with images that, as far as we know, only they would ever see. Why? We do not know for certain, but there are clues. One possibility is teaching. Imagine the hunters of your group bringing adolescents into the cave, torches in hand, pointing at painted herds while telling stories. Where to aim your spear, how a wounded animal behaves, which season the bison pass through which valley. The cave walls become a kind of three-dimensional blackboard, a school hidden under the earth. Another possibility is ritual. In many traditional societies, images of animals are not just pictures, they are tools to influence reality, to draw a successful hunt into being before it happens, to honor the spirit of the animals you depend on, to apologize even for taking their lives. Those painted bison may have been more like prayers than paintings, or perhaps it was both. Teaching wrapped in myth, practical knowledge encoded in sacred stories, a ritual hunt painted in the dark that prepared you for a real hunt in the dawn. And still the question lingers, why so deep? Why risk the dangers of underground tunnels when a rock face outside would work just as well? Some archaeologists think those deep chambers were chosen precisely because they cut you off from ordinary life. Once you were down there, there was no day or night, no horizon, no weather, just stone, darkness, fire, voices, and whatever moved inside your own mind. That is the perfect recipe for altered states of consciousness, which brings us to something we cannot fossilize, but we can infer: early spirituality. Across many hunter-gatherer cultures today, there are figures we would call shamans, people who dance, chant, fast, or use psychoactive plants to enter trance states. They travel to other realms, talk to ancestors, negotiate with animal spirits, heal the sick. If something like that existed tens of thousands of years ago, and the evidence suggests it might have, it would make perfect sense to bring those ceremonies deep underground into the belly of the earth itself. In the dark caves of Europe, archaeologists have found strange clusters of dots, lines, and geometric signs around the animal paintings. Ladders, zigzags, hand stencils, series of dots that may line up with lunar cycles. Some researchers think these marks formed an early notational system, a way of counting days, tracking seasons, maybe even predicting migrations. Others think those shapes resemble patterns people see in visions, the geometric flashes that appear behind closed eyes during trance. If that is true, then the walls of these caves are not just records of animals, but records of experiences inside the human mind. While all this was happening underground, something else was happening on the surface. People were decorating themselves. Long before the famous cave paintings of Europe, tens of thousands of years earlier, humans in Africa were grinding ochre, iron-rich minerals, into powder. They mixed it with fat or water. They rubbed it on their skin. They smeared it on tools. At sites over 100,000 years old, archaeologists have found pieces of ochre deliberately shaped and engraved, as well as shells pierced for threading, little beads worn smooth in places where they rubbed against a skin or clothing, stained with pigment, necklaces, bracelets, maybe anklets that jingled when you walked or danced. Personal adornment might sound trivial compared to hunting mammoths, but it marks a profound shift. When you start decorating your body, you are sending messages without words. Color, pattern, and jewelry tell people who you are and where you belong. Married or single, healer or hunter, member of this group. Not that one. Those beads and pendants may have carried stories too. A shell from the coast worn by someone who lived far inland means trade or travel, or a memory of a journey. A tooth from a dangerous animal might be a trophy, a reminder that you faced fear and survived. Red ochre in particular shows up over and over in burials. Bodies dusted with red, graves lined with pigment. Maybe it symbolized blood or life or the setting sun. Whatever, it meant something. By the time you get to about 35,000 years ago, this symbolic world becomes crowded. Now it is not just beads and paint and animal images. People start carving the human form itself. The Venus figurines, small, often handheld sculptures, carved from bone, ivory, or stone, share a similar style across huge distances. From France to Siberia, many have exaggerated breasts, hips, and bellies. Faces are often minimal or absent. The focus is on bodies that look pregnant, fertile, abundant. What were they? Some think they were fertility charms, held by women as a kind of hope for healthy children. Others suggest they were representations of a mother goddess, an early form of deity that embodied birth, nourishment, and the cycles of life and death. There is even a theory that some were self-portraits, carved by pregnant women, looking down at their own bodies, seeing their belly, hips, and breasts, but not their face. We cannot be sure, but whatever their purpose, these figures show something crucial. People were thinking about themselves as symbols, not just as bodies, but as something that could be represented, abstracted, made meaningful. And that symbolic thinking did not stop with bodies and animals. It extended to the sky. There are hints, just hints, that some early humans were paying careful attention to the stars. At a few sites, carved bones and stones show series of notches that may match the phases of the moon or seasonal events like migrations and plant ripenings. If your survival depends on remembering when the herds move, when the salmon run, when certain plants are edible, you watch the sky. You notice patterns. Eventually, you might start to think the sky is a kind of giant story written just for you. And if the sky tells stories, then perhaps the animals do too. For hunter-gatherer peoples around the world, animals are rarely just meat. They are persons of a different sort. Teachers, tricksters, guardians, the bear that walks on two legs, the raven who steals the sun, the antelope that gave humans fire. These stories are not just entertainment. They are moral lessons, ecological knowledge, maps of the landscape woven into memory. Your Paleolithic ancestors almost certainly saw the world this way. When they painted a running horse on a cave wall, they may not have been drawing a horse. They may have been invoking a spirit that moves like a horse, thinks like a horse, sees the world from a horse's height. The result is a world where everything is alive with meaning. Rocks, rivers, trees, animals, clouds, stars, all with stories and intentions. And in that world, special people would emerge. The ones who dream vividly, who notice patterns no one else sees, who can calm a panicked child or soothe someone in pain with words and songs. These become the shamans, or whatever your ancestors called them. Imagine a night near the fire. The day's work is done. People sit in a loose circle, some mending tools, others half asleep. The shaman, the storyteller, the one who goes between, begins. A drum starts, maybe nothing more than stretched hide, over a frame or a hollow log struck with a stick. The beat begins slow, heart-like, then faster. Voices rise. Feet start to tap. The group's breathing unconsciously synchronizes. After a while, you are not just listening to the rhythm, you are inside it. Music is one of the oldest human technologies we know. Bone flutes made from the wing bones of birds, simple percussion instruments that would leave no trace in the archaeological record, but are almost certainly as old as language itself. In the flickering firelight, rhythm and melody do something extraordinary. They dissolve the boundaries between individuals. When everyone moves in time, sings the same phrase, claps on the same beat, the group becomes a single organism for a while. Fear contracts. Time stretches. People enter shared trance states, mild or deep, without needing anything but breath and sound and movement. That is the social function of early spirituality. It is not only about explaining thunderstorms or what happens after you die. It is about welding small, fragile groups of humans into something strong enough to survive. Shared rituals, shared symbols, shared songs. They are the glue that holds the band together when food is scarce and danger is near. And when you put all of this together, the deep cave art, the beads and ochre, the carved figurines, the abstract marks, the music and trance, you get a picture of early humans that is very different from the caricature of brutish cavemen. By day, they tracked animals, napped stone, dug roots, watched the weather. By night, they stepped into a different world, a world where the dead might listen, where the sky might speak, where animals had secret names and mountains remembered. They carried heavy spears and sharp tools, but they also carried invisible things, myths, songs, rules, taboos, dreams. That inner life, the songs, the symbols, the sense of hidden forces moving through everything, never really stopped. It is still with us. Only now, instead of torchlight on limestone, we use screens in the dark. Instead of ochre on skin, we use digital avatars in fashion. Instead of carved ivory figurines, we have icons and logos and characters that mean far more to us than their physical substance. The tools have changed. The wiring underneath has not. As the night deepens in our Paleolithic camp, the last embers glow red. Someone turns over in their sleep. A child murmurs and is soothed. Outside, a distant wolf howls, and no one wakes. They have heard it 1,000 times. By late afternoon, the light is changing. Shadows start to stretch. Colors drain out of the landscape, and the temperature drops faster than you would expect. For Paleolithic people, this is not just a pretty sunset. It is a signal, a quiet alarm telling everyone, Whatever you still need to do, finish it now. The open landscape that felt manageable in daylight becomes something very different in the dark. Depth perception collapses. Predators that spent the day hiding in the shade start to move, so your ancestors begin to contract their world, pulling it inward, drawing activity toward the same thing that has defined evening for humans for at least hundreds of thousands of years: fire. Not everybody had it all the time. There were probably still groups that lost fire occasionally or went without during travel. But for many late Paleolithic communities, fire was as central to the evening as gravity is to your body right now. It is not just a tool, it is a boundary line. Inside the circle of light and warmth, us. Outside it, everything else. As the sun sinks, people drift back toward camp, toward that flickering center. Gatherers return with armloads of wood, bundles of plants, maybe a few surprise finds, eggs, honey, shellfish. Hunters straggle in later, sometimes triumphant with meat, sometimes empty-handed and silent. Children who have spent the day in a swarm of games and experiments tighten their radius, pulled in by the same invisible gravity. Before anyone truly rests, though, there is one more job that matters as much as food: building a place to sleep.